The wheel of the year has turned once more, conjuring memories up from before. The mother a circle, the father a line, the journey a spiral as these two combine. As bodies in heaven turn and revolve, so do our spirits as we do evolve. Each year we go round the wheel of the year, we move closer to love and farther from fear. And as the cosmic clock does turn, along our own journey we live and we learn. On this sacred day and night, of equal dark and equal light, we start the light half of the year and bravely step beyond our fear. Spring Equinox, a time of power, when the days grow longer by the hour. It's the witch's season of coming out, to cast away that old self-doubt. Like new seedlings, young and fragile, we vow to grow up strong and agile. We plant our seeds of intention and embrace this season of reinvention. Now's our time to start anew, to do those things we've been wishing to do, to see more of what we venture to see, and be more of who we aspire to be. As the days grow longer than the nights, we expand our horizons to greater heights. In winter, we grow our intuition, and now our dreams grow to fruition. As the daylight hours grow, we say farewell to the last of the snow. And as the tulips begin to bloom, so does our power in the goddess's womb. Enthusiastic like the sign of Aries, and pure of heart like children or fairies. The inner child comes out to play, unafraid to say what it needs to say. Magic is the power to write our own story, and that's what we do in this season of glory. Blessed be this coming spring, and may all life's pleasures the season bring. The new year is getting well underway, and we're now arriving at the first quarter of the Earth's path around the sun. The Spring Equinox, also known as Ostara, is the time of year when the daylight hours, which have been slowly growing longer since the winter solstice, finally catch up to the hours of darkness. Equinox means equal night, denoting that both the northern and southern hemisphere will have 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness on this day. After the equinox, the daylight hours will begin to grow longer than the nighttime hours, and springtime has officially begun. In the northern hemisphere, the spring equinox takes place around March 21st, and in the southern hemisphere, it's around September 21st. In the modern witchy and neo-pagan community, the Sabbat tends to be called Ostara because the religion known as Wicca is where most pagan reconstructionists derive their Wheel of the Year. In the 1900s, Wicca was invented by a coven of neo-pagans known as Gardnerians after their leader Gerald Gardner. They took what they could gather from historical accounts of various pre-Christian spiritual practices in Europe and designed this modern witches' calendar. They derived names for the solstices, equinoxes, and the midpoints in between, using ancient European concepts as the inspiration. The name Ostara is said to come from Northern Europe, referring to the name of a goddess or nature spirit who ruled over themes of fertility, rebirth, the hour of dawn, and of course, springtime. It's also believed that Easter is derived from this and other pagan traditions, including perhaps the super ancient Mesopotamian mother goddess, Ishtar, who many later cultures used as the inspiration for their versions of mother goddesses. Because many of us modern witches were separated from the pagan teachings of our own ancestors over the course of history, some of us have found it helpful to borrow aspects of the Wiccan Wheel of the Year for our contemporary practice. This is why it's very common for the words Ostara and Spring Equinox to be used interchangeably, even by witches and pagans who do not otherwise identify with the Wiccan religion. But almost every culture around the world have their own traditions for the Spring Equinox that we also draw inspiration from as well. So whether or not the subject of ancient gods and traditions interests you, the universal themes of the Spring Equinox season are some of the most fun, relevant, and actionable of the witches' calendar. We can all feel connected to the idea of shaking things up and getting inspired this time of year. I like to focus on 3 major themes of the season in my practice: emergence, recalibration, and the inner child. Emergence. We've all endured the long, dark, introspective days of winter, and it's time to finally come out and begin emerging from that cocoon. The spring equinox is the time when the first seedlings begin to emerge from the soil, bravely stepping out into the world after their incubation period. Seedlings are small, pale, and fragile when they first emerge into this unknown world, but they stretch bravely out of the soil with the promise of the potential for growth, expansion, and eventually seeding a legacy for the year to come. Much like the seedling, we may or may not feel totally ready to have that springtime coming out party, but we must embrace the vulnerability, trusting in ourselves and trusting in the universe. It's time to step up and begin taking tangible action toward the new version of ourselves that we've resolved to evolve into this year. 2 questions to ask yourself around the subject of emergence. Which of my resolutions am I ready to start taking action on? What might that look like or feel like? And which of my resolutions are still feeling a bit fragile? Do I need to reevaluate my goals and intentions? Or do I just need to take some baby steps towards those goals until they feel more tangible? Or do I just want to dive right in? One resolution that I'm ready to start taking action on is prioritizing my cat's health. I've been the primary caregiver of multiple cats since I was about 13 years old. It was 20 years ago, and not only was it very uncommon for the average Joe to be well educated on the ins and outs of proper feline care, but I was also not the head of household, so I wasn't the one who had the last word on all of the decision making around my cats and their needs. And admittedly, even into my 20s, it wasn't always my top priority to research and implement top-notch cat care in my household because, to be honest, I was struggling to survive adulting overall. But of course, I've always loved my cats so much, and I've always continued to improve my cat parenting practices over the years. I feel so blessed that the family of strays I took in as a preteen all lived very long and mostly healthy lives. But after both observing some of their challenges towards the end of their lives, and especially after dealing with the major health emergencies that my other younger cat has gone through, I'm feeling like now is the time for me to step into a more proactive role as a cat caregiver. What's held me back from feeling like I could take action on this area was overwhelm. Not only did other commitments in my life take precedence, but I also feared that my big dream of being a truly magnificent cat lady were out of reach. I assumed it would be expensive or time-consuming to provide better care for my cats, especially when I was solely responsible for 4 of them. But at the same time, I also have a dream of someday owning an epic cat sanctuary. So rather than getting stuck in analysis paralysis, I continue to take baby steps. This winter, I learned some really important information about cat nutrition, and that most of what's marketed as cat food really isn't good for them. And even though I've been on a tight budget while saving for a new home for Mowgli and I asked myself, how can I take one step towards improving his nutrition without necessarily even spending any money at all right away? And with a little research, I quickly discovered which foods I already keep in my kitchen for myself that could be added to his diet as a supplement. Eventually, I'll most likely evolve his diet completely as I gain more education and experience and resources. But for now, I've given myself permission to just get started by reaching for the low-hanging fruit. Literally. And of course, since it's me, I've ritualized this resolution with a little kitchen witch magic. Believe it or not, I actually called upon my cat's higher self and used my pendulum to ask which of the suggested ingredients to include, and repeated my cat protection incantation while mixing the food. It goes, "Blessed be the garden, blessed be the home, blessed be the kitty cats wherever they may roam." And I did this all while inserting the intention, not only for Mowgli to be healthy and happy, and for us to manifest a home that can eventually become a safe space for other cats in need of homes, but also for the health, safety, and happiness of all cats everywhere and the people who care for them. It's just a small serving of raw fish and vegetables in an old hand-me-down blender, but it's also the energetic initiation of a much larger movement that I'm aligning myself with from this moment forward. And that is exactly how real magic is made, by starting somewhere and inserting the intention for greater expansion. Recalibration. As with both the autumn and spring equinoxes, this time embodies a major shift between darkness and light. This time, we're shifting from an abundance of darkness to an abundance of light. The darker half of the year was a time to turn inward towards self-reflection, domestic matters, and shadow work. Now, we're making the transition into the light, bright days of the year. It's time to ease ourselves out of the cocoon and step forward with a lighthearted sense of renewal. For those of us who really tend to hibernate during the winter, we'll need to make a conscious effort to ease ourselves into the more social, outgoing days of the bright season. Some questions to ask yourself around the theme of recalibration. What did I learn about myself this winter that I wasn't as aware of last year this time? How can I use the information gathered during this self-reflective time of winter to step into a bolder, more confident, and outgoing version of myself this spring? One thing I learned about myself over the winter that I wasn't aware of last year this time is that self-love, self-worth, and self-care are even bigger parts of my soul's journey and purpose than I had previously been aware of. Obviously, these are themes I've been immersed in for years now, but it's occurred to me while facing big challenges in my life this past year that these themes were growing stronger and stronger. Where last year I kind of was just feeling that rock bottom energy and turning to self-care as a helpful coping mechanism, this year the situation has evolved into a more empowering and proactive lifestyle. The huge challenges have continued to be present, but I've noticed a huge difference in myself. The way I view and respond to triggers and challenges has changed. Last year, I set the intention to laugh more, be more playful, and be more magical and expressive, and to dive deeper into reprogramming my subconscious mind to cultivate the belief that everything is happening for me rather than to me. My mindset has evolved to a place where, rather than asking for challenges to be taken away and then feeling low self-worth and a vicious cycle of disappointment when the projective outcome I had been attached to didn't manifest, now I've learned to have no expectations as to what the outside circumstances will even be. Instead, I focused more and more of my energy on basing my self-worth on my intrinsic existence, and consistently accepting and valuing myself, rain or shine. When outside circumstances happen that would have made the old version of me feel like the universe was picking on me, I now have learned to instead lean into self-love, self-worth, and self-care all the more, taking the challenges and triggers as opportunities to strengthen my self-love muscle more and more. And you know what? I found that some of the old familiar triggers don't even trigger me anymore. I've become immune to them, freeing up massive amounts of my energy to be applied to things that are actually important to me, like being playful and creative, even in my imperfect situation. And one of the results of this recalibration has been wildly improving my YouTube content in the past year, and launching a Patreon and finally receiving more abundance from generous patrons who find this more authentic and playful form of my artistic expression valuable and inspiring. The inner child. This time of year is often represented by babies of all species. Seedlings, chicks, bunnies, lambs. We tend to decorate in the springtime with pastel colors and engage in playful activities. This is all a way of celebrating our own inner child. The inner child archetype is part of the self that can be evoked at any time to help remind us what fun is. In adulthood, we have so many responsibilities and ambitions that we can often lose sight of what really makes us feel happy, playful, and alive. Let this time of year be a celebration of just that. Some questions to ask yourself around the inner child theme. Simply, who is my inner child? What does my inner child love about life? What do they love to do and experience? What can I do this spring to evoke my inner child into my practice and/or my everyday life? My inner child is a very whimsical, magical, and playful little girl. She loves to observe nature, celebrate seasons, make art inspired by her favorite themes, get crafty with magical and mundane things, and dream about what's possible beyond the status quo. I've already reconnected with and expressed my inner child a lot more since last year this time, and I'm so grateful that I took the time to journal about this theme last spring. And now, this year, I'm excited to see the next level that's being made possible through the progress that I've made thus far. In last year's entry, I journaled about the energy of the Six of Cups tarot card, how I'd been feeling disconnected from my inner child because embodying that part of myself didn't feel safe. Because my adult responsibilities and outside circumstances had led to a lot of trauma in the past few years, I felt like my inner child was afraid to come out and play. I was desiring to have a safe space, a beautiful walled garden, and someone strong and responsible to look out for me, provide for me, and keep me safe so I could remember what it was like to play. And of course, I remembered that both the inner child, represented by the kids in the forefront of the card, as well as the warrior archetype, represented by the guard in the background, are parts of me. And in order to live as my most empowered and fulfilled self, I needed to recalibrate my way of balancing those two different inner archetypes. As the sun goes into Aries season, which starts on the spring equinox, it's an empowering combination of inner child and warrior energy. Aries represents both the brave, confident warrior who isn't too tired or too afraid to create what he wants for himself in the outside world. And Aries is also the astrological new year, the birth of new life that's potent, playful, and pure, like the inner child. In the past year, I've evoked both these energies in bold new ways, and it's created a sense of safety and confidence to become both more relaxed and more successful in my inner and outer expression. With that power supporting me, this spring equinox, I can call on these energies in even bigger ways as I dream even bigger for myself and for my goals. Because working with the inner child is such an important archetype in my practice, and because being an adult, it can be sometimes difficult to stay aligned with that inner child, I've actually created a really beautiful guided meditation that I like to use anytime that I'm feeling disconnected from my inner child. It actually takes you on a little adventure to time travel back to whatever favorite childhood memory pops up for you, and to take some inspiration, advice, wisdom, and symbolism that's offered to you by your inner child. Your inner child gets to become a sort of spirit guide that reminds you of what fun and joy are to you. If you would like to download the recording of that meditation, you can grab it at the link below. Now, for my seasonal journal prompts, I like to keep it condensed to just 3 main themes to focus on for each of the 8 seasons on the witch's calendar. But for this video, I really felt compelled to also mention a bonus theme: balance. So if evoking the astrological energies of the seasons interests you, you may also wish to do some moon magic this spring with the theme of balance. The full moon, which occurs closest to the spring equinox, which this year is April 16th, 2022, is always in the sign of Libra, which is the opposite sign from Aries, which is the sign the sun is in at that time. In astrology, it's recommended to evoke the opposite sign from what the sun is in to achieve a healthy sense of balance at any time in the year. And it's also interesting to note how the full moons are always in that opposite sign every time. In this case, it's extra relevant to this theme of balance because not only is balance also a major theme of the equinoxes with the whole equal day, equal night thing, but the full moon that takes place after the spring equinox is in the sign of Libra, which itself is the archetype of the scales of balance. This makes sense because the sun goes into the sign of Libra at the other of the 2 equinoxes, 6 months from now at the autumn equinox. By the way, the autumn equinox is when I include a prompt about balance. but the theme works for both equinoxes. So if my story about evoking archetypes that balance each other out this season speaks to you, the Spring Equinox, which is any of the 3 days surrounding the 20th of March, the Libra full moon, which takes place April 16th, and the new moon in Aries on April 1st could all be powerful dates for spells and intention setting rituals for you. My moon sign is actually in Aries, so it makes sense that I always experience some kind of empowering rebirth during this season. So are there any important astrological transits coming up for you this spring? Or what are your traditions that you have coming up around the spring equinox, whether you've celebrated it as Ostara or not? I would love to know how you work with the seasonal and astrological energies and themes for spring in the comments below. I plan on sharing more of my practices for the spring equinox in an upcoming video, but I'm still deciding what to focus my creative energy on next. So if you haven't done so already, I would love to invite you to like this video to let me know that you want to see more on this season, and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you can catch whatever video I create for you next. If you enjoyed the information and prompts which were shared in this video, I would also love to invite you to grab the journal/grimoire pages that I've created for the spring equinox. You can download them as printables, or you can order pre-printed copies from the Writing Witch shop. Or you can get access to all 8 sets of journaling prompts by joining my year-in-a-day journaling adventure, which is called Your Book of Seasons. That program also includes recorded lessons on how to utilize the energies of the seasons for manifestation of your desires. The Spring Equinox pages are also available to some of the tiers on Patreon, along with additional video content for the season. And of course, I have also created a playlist for you right here on YouTube with some more Spring Equinox inspiration, which I invite you to check out right here.